Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an Agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top Agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Christophe Martinot, who is the co-founder of Seeding Energy and also author of the new book, Spiral Up. Welcome, Christophe.
Hello, John. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast. We've done, I think, one or two things before, but we've known one another for many years. You're such a great member of the Agile marketing community, and you have a great background in the pharmaceutical industry, and you turn to providing Agile consulting and services. Isn't that right?
Yes, correct. Yes, I work still a lot with pharmaceutical companies, and I'm still accompanying teams in their transformation journey in order to be more customer-centric and more adaptable and flexible to the faster change that we are all experiencing nowadays.
Great. Well, you've written this new book, Spiral Up. What inspired you to write Spiral Up? And when you began the project, what problem were you trying to solve for leaders and teams?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, it's been a long process. And I started, I think, 3 years and a half ago. And my goal was somehow to provide teams with a guidance, not a playbook, but really a guidance in order to face this fast changing environment that teams are encountering nowadays. You know that change is happening so fast. And for some teams and some leaders, it's from time to time difficult to know how to tackle with this change and how to still deliver value to your customers. So this is when I started with the process, and it took me quite a while because I really wanted to come with something that people would remind, and I hope that now Spiral, the 6 letters that are composing the word spiral, are helping people to really remind it and to remember it and to use it as a guide.
Well, you talked a little bit there about the 6 words. So there's a framework. You emphasize working with the team as a system rather than focusing on individuals. Why is that distinction so important?
Well, actually, because I've done and I've been trained in systemic coaching. And what you learn there is that a team is a system, and it's a system that has its own life. So of course, it's the sum of the different individuals that are creating the team, but the team itself exists as a system. And what's really important is that you accompany the team as the system, and that you're not taking into account each one of the individuals, so that you take into account how the system is evolving, how the system is reacting, and how the system is expressing itself. So it's true that you need to hear all the voices within the system, but it's important to understand that the system by its own is intelligent, is very flexible, very adaptable, and this is what you need to accompany in order to have and achieve better successes with the teams.
Do you think that how do you make that workable for team members so that they don't feel as if it's just a system rather than individuals? How does that work within the framework?
Well, I think it's you need to train the team. You need to train and to make people understand that they are creating a system, that they are collaborating or contributing to a system. And this in every exercises that we do, what we try is to reveal what's happening within the system. And therefore, you need to listen to all the voices within the system. Why? Because sometimes when you work with team, what you can figure out is that some people are more talkative than others, and others are more silent. And actually, the fact that some of those people are very quiet and not saying too much, it's also a signal. So our role as a coach is also to make the system talk and call for those people that might be a little bit more quiet or silent, find some ways for them to express what they really feel, sense, and experience in that system.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So moving now to customers, what patterns do you see when teams and leaders have different perceptions of customer value?
Well, that's a good question, because I mean, I'm hammering all the teams I'm working with. I'm hammering them with one word, which is value. You need to deliver value to your customer. And this is where people or teams are often struggling because they don't know what value is. And then this is where we introduce, of course, the difference between what is an output and what is an outcome. And of course, the team needs to or wants to bring some to achieve some outcomes with their customers. So the big challenges that I'm facing with teams is sometimes, and it might be or seem a little bit strange, but I can see some teams that are struggling in order to identify their customer, and they are getting confused between what is a customer and what is a stakeholder. And that's absolutely not the same. So if you look at what the team's customer is definitely the work that the team is delivering is going to their customer, and their customer should find some value in this work. Otherwise, they're just producing stuff without any value, and the customer won't react and won't find or won't change. I mean, that's the point, right? So when what I'm seeing is first identification of their customers, and secondly is what does that mean to deliver value to their customer. And often, and I think it's a question of training, and because all those people that I'm working with are usually very well educated. They went to very good business schools or to marketing training, but often what they tend to forget is that marketing is not about guessing what your customer wants. It's about co-creating with the customer what they really is useful for them. And this is where also I'm insisting in the spiral model. It's that the second letter of the spiral, it's about providing. And providing, it's insisting on the value that you're providing to your customer, that you're delivering to your customer. And then the third letter is about inspecting. Once you deliver anything to your customer, you need to inspect in order to see and check what is the customer's feedback, so that you can, after that, react or respond, which is the fourth letter of the framework. So basically, the idea is really about identify your customer and work with your customer in order to make sure that everything you as a team are delivering is really of value. The person that knows the best what is valuable for him is your customer. So be with him and work hands in hands with him.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Let's go to our sponsor.
Hey marketers, Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
On team assessments, how does the self-assessment process work? What kinds of insights does it typically reveal?
Yes, so you're mentioning the team assessment. It's because we've created an assessment based on the spiral up framework, right? So what we're assessing are the the 6 principles of the spiral up framework. Maybe I will refresh the one who haven't, or the one who have read the book, or the one who haven't heard about it. Maybe I will explain what are the 6 letters. The first one is about synergizing. The team needs to synergize and make sure that 1 + 1 = 3, that all their strengths together is not the sum of the individuals, but it's achieving something greater than the sum of their work. The P is about providing value, like I just explained, providing value to your customer. The I is about inspecting, constantly inspect what you're delivering to your customer and get its feedback in order to be able then to react, to respond. So the R is about responding, which means that I'm getting the feedback, I will respond to what the customer is telling me, but I will also respond to the changes that I may observe in the environment. The 4th letter is about act and accept. Once you've had the feedback, once you've seen what has changed in the environment, you need as a team to act, to take a decision, and to accept that there might be some risk, because this is something that is paralyzing some teams. They don't dare to take any risk. And then in a changing environment, if you don't take any risk, there is no way you can innovate and bring value to your customer. And the last letter is about learning. So it's for the team to take the time to reflect, like in basketball, while the team is playing, sometimes the coach is asking for a timeout, which is only about, let's stop, let's think about how we work and how can we improve the way we're working. So basically, the assessment is based on those 6 letters, and we ask the team to self-assess themselves. So each individual get to answer a battery of questions, and based on those questions, we have an aggregate result for the team. And we separate the view from the leader, so we can see what is the vision of the leader about the team, and what is the team's vision about itself. So we often see bias. Why? Because the leader tends to look or to see the team not as good as it is, and the teams tend most of the time to over-evaluate themselves, so to rate themselves better than what they really are. And then you could add a third pillar, which would be ask your customers. So the customer could also assess the team about how they work and what they deliver. And then we have the 3 dimensions that enabled us to really understand where the bias are and where we need to work on each one of the principles of the Spiral Up framework.
So what are the most common blind spots that teams discover when they assess themselves?
Yes, well, blind spots are somehow at many levels. Often what I'm seeing is that the mission, the purpose, the reason why the team exists is not always very clear. And most of the time teams are confused and they think that their goals is exactly the same as their mission. Their mission, the purpose, the reason why they exist is much higher. It's an inspiration, right? And then that's already one of the big blind spots that we're seeing. Synergizing, it's not the sum of the strength of the people. It's how you make those strengths working so well that the sum of it achieve a bigger result than what is the simple addition of their strength. So here again, yes.
Well, Christophe, I was just thinking maybe that's part of the issue with marketing teams where they often focus so much on making sure that work is done and it's done to perfection that they don't stop and say, well, we've got too much work and we can't do it all. We can't do it all. So when the reality is it's more about creating the most value for customers rather than just getting the work done.
And that's one of the blind spots, like you say, also that we find out with the teams is that most of the time when they assess themselves, they say, okay, yes, we deliver value, we provide value to our customers, but for instance, they're not inspecting. So by the fact that they're delivering what they think value, but not inspecting them, you already can see that they're probably delivering a lot of things, but they're not inspecting if it really brings value to their customer. And then you have this feeling of overwhelming. And by the way, each of those assessments, we end up giving, I don't remember the name now. We give them a definition to all of the teams. So some are firefighters, others are observers, others are sustainers. And this helps the team to understand where they are and how the customers is perceiving them as well. So there are a lot of blind spots at the end of the day that we're getting to reveal through the assessment.
How do you help the leaders diagnose what's really happening in their team? I mean, there's the self-assessment process itself, but is it the conversation that happens? How does that work? How does the dynamic work?
So we are working in a different ways, and it depends on the team and how much psychological safety there is in each team. But what we could do, and we do often, it's running the assessment during a workshop, so that it's not only people filling in some questions or a questionnaire, but what we are facilitating the workshop. And what we engage the team to discuss really what is the level of response or how they want to rate each one of the questions. And this is bringing a lot of transparency, a lot of honesty, and a lot of very rich conversation within the team. So this helps also a lot the leader to understand better where is happening. Just for an example, before Christmas, I was with the global team, and the leader was just new to the team, and we run such a workshop with him. And all the conversation after the workshop, he came to us and he told us, wow, I've learned so much in 4 hours, and much more than what I could have done with an observation for 6 months. So I really gained time and valuable insights thanks to the workshop, because really it revealed so many things that the team wasn't even always aware of it.
So the self-assessment helps with this process, but how do you coach leaders who are struggling to understand or influence the team's dynamics?
Also, we've created another assessment, which is a spiraling leader assessment. And it's also, again, the leader is assessing himself, and we ask the team to assess the leader. So you could say, oh, but that's a 360. Yes, it's the idea of a 360, but it's based on the spiral up framework. And it really enables or helps the leaders to understand where does he need to work in order to make the team synergize more, to put more focus on the provide, which is the providing value, because this will help the team to prioritize better, in installing some inspection mechanism and so on. So we also have different kind of tools that we can use with the leaders in order to really help him to make the team spiraling up.
Moving on to global teams and cultural differences, how does the spiral up approach adapt to global teams with different cultural norms? I certainly understand that. I haven't worked in very many international businesses, but I did work for a language translation company that had 50 offices around the world, and worked with colleagues around the world. So I definitely understood there can be. And actually our business was that, where we were making sure that language was tuned to a particular culture.
Well, so far so good, because I've run the assessment and then I've done the workshop with many teams and with global teams, with people from India, from the United States, from South America, from Africa, from Europe. And from what we've seen, we haven't seen a big issue with the cultural differences. You're right. Of course, we all interpret things in a different way based on our cultural background. But somehow in the business, I have the feeling that the fact that we're using this framework, for instance, is helping a lot everybody to understand it better. Maybe, again, we have some issues with, for instance, some concepts like customer or stakeholders, but I'm not so sure it's tied to the cultural aspect. It's more tied to the company vocabulary, or the way you think that you need to be customer centric, or the way you perceive who your customers are.
Well, you have differences in in different customers, right, across different global locations. So that might have differences. But does your process help with companies understanding on a global scale what those differences are, and does it help with that process?
I think so, yes. And I think, what's interesting when we work with global team, this is where I'm seeing most of the time the misunderstanding of and the confusion with the customers and the stakeholders. Global teams do not always understand who their real customer is. And most of the time, those might be the countries that are receiving the fruit of their work, while the stakeholders are the ones that are helping them to create this work and deliver that work to the countries. So when we work with global teams, I think the fact that we come with this framework and this really this strong assessment, it really enables them to understand better. Oh, this is my customer. Those are stakeholders, and then this is when we can start working on providing the value. I don't know if I'm answering your question or just divaguing.
No, I think so. It strikes me that spiral up method is really strong because of its assessment process, and it's really giving people good data and information about what the issues are in their approach forward. How much has Agile influenced this? Because when I think of Agile and the Agile Manifesto, either for developers or marketers, there is the assessment almost comes into play by people reflecting on things themselves, which you're doing with the assessment, but it seems like a much more formal process. I mean, how do you see the differences, and what were the influences with Agile on Spiral Up?
Well, the influence is, of course, huge. I mean, we've met when we were when I started to join the Agile marketing community, and of course I learned a lot about Agile, and I think this is where I learned also how I could be of any help for some teams and organizations, because I've worked for 20 years in those big companies, big corporations, and we've been trained somehow to try to maintain the status quo as much as possible. You grow, but don't change too many things. And nowadays it's impossible. And that's why I came up with the Spiral Up framework. Nowadays, change is faster than ever. And companies and teams needs to adapt as fast as possible. And like you said, there's a lot of reflecting, and it's a lot about also continuous improvement in the Spiral Up framework. So when I'm talking about the assessment, we use it as a starting point, but we also recommend to do a pulse after 6 months so that we can see how the team has evolved. In the Spiral Up framework, we've defined 3 types of zones. One, which is you're spiraling up as a team. The other one is you're stagnating and you're at risk of spiraling down. And a team is never guaranteed to be spiraling up for his entire life or existence, or stagnating. So you can always move forward. The only requirement that you need is to reflect constantly and look for continuous improvement. And that's what the Spiral Up framework is also looking at. So it's really well, and you've sensed it because you're a very smart guy. Of course, it's influenced by Agile, and there are a lot of things that are coming from Agile. The only thing that I would say also is that when we speak about Agile, many people, apart from the manifesto, also think about methodologies, more frameworks like Scrum, like Kanban or Scrumban or whatever. And in this case, Spiral Up, it's not about that, because every time I accompany a team, it's about customizing what are the ways of working that we could implement so that the team can be more resilient, agile, and flexible in front of this constant change. So and I will pick some of the stuff that come from the Agile frameworks, of course, but I will try really to tailor something that will help them to spiral up and to make it really customized to their ways of working and their needs.
Let's go to our sponsor. This makes a lot of sense to me, Christophe, and I've been thinking over the last year to 6 months about the nature of marketers versus developers, and the reasons why marketers are CMOs have such a short tenure. And I think it comes down to this, but I think it's very relevant to what you're doing here with Spiral Up, in that you're using Spiral Up as a methodology, as a way for people to think about constant change. And for marketers, I think what companies don't realize is the level of chaos that happens in the marketing situation. You know, for an IT person working on a project, it's a very manageable. I'm not saying that change doesn't happen in IT projects or programming projects. Customers are still involved, but the level of chaos for marketers is this, where you have customers who are constantly changing and they're looking at different competitors, and you've got competitors who are constantly changing and changing the dynamic. And I think it's obvious, but marketers are managing chaos, you know. So I think Spiral Up can definitely help those marketers to sort of assess the changes that are happening, not in the company, and the companies have to change, but the changes that are happening with customers and also the competitors. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I fully agree. And I think it's not only about marketers, because I think we already had this conversation, I think, a few years back, that for me, Agile should not be restricted to only marketers. We talk about Agile marketing, but and somehow with Spiral Up, this is also what I wanted to achieve. I'm a fan and a pro of cross-functional teams. And when I mean cross-functional team, I mean sales, marketing, legal, compliance, regulatory, whatever other department. They all should be working in the sense of delivering value to their customers. So definitely the framework is valuable, I think, for marketing teams. And actually, I'm working with marketing teams as well. But I'm always trying to push the organization to also transform their ways of working and become more cross-functional so that they're at the service of the customer. The silos that are existing, and the typical one is marketing sales, for me are nonsense. And if you're claiming that you're customer-centric, but your marketing and sales are working in different paths, so there's no way you will become customer-centric. There will be some frustration there.
What was interesting to me when you were talking about that dichotomy between sales and marketing, and I totally agree with you, it shouldn't be a difference. It should rather be a partnership. With account-based marketing, that strategy really brought people together, right? The two teams, and they had to work cross-functionally. Marketers are doing things that they would never traditionally do, which was actually work at the account level. And then salespeople were actually helping to develop messaging and strategies, working in tandem with the marketers, as it were. And one reason I like account-based marketing is because from the get-go, it's making sure that there's cross-functionality with the teams that are there, and Spiral Up, I think, needs to do that same. You know, Spiral Up does that same thing across the team. So I totally get your point, Christophe, that it really is about breaking those barriers down and getting over the fear about transparency, about what we have to do and what we need to do.
And it's exactly where the synergy should appear. You know, the first principle in the Spiral Up framework, it's about synergizing. And it's not only your team, but you need to synergize with the other departments that are working with you at the service of your customers. So that's definitely, I really like what you just explained about the account-based marketing, because I think that's a right approach. Marketing and sales should work together.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. It never made sense to me why there would be any differences between. I mean, I know how it comes about with their different goals, but in the end, it's the same mission, right? And that's what the focus needs to be.
But you see, in what you've just mentioned, this is also very interesting, because we always say that the culture follows the structure, right? And then many companies, they give different ways of incentivizing their people. And if you give if you reframe the way you give bonuses to your people, you may change the culture. So it's not only about how many boxes or how many products have you sold. It's also maybe it would be nice to have a metric which would be customer satisfaction, because this is a responsibility of both marketing and sales and the entire organization. How satisfied is your customer with everything what you do? It's not only about sales. Of course, sales is one of the objectives, but there should be other metrics that enable a collaborative and cross-functional collaboration, as well as cross-fertilization, which is very important, I think.
It must be really interesting to use the spiral up method and to develop new strategies, but also to use the spiral up method to identify the level of change that's happened. Could you speak to those 2 points?
Yes, because I mean, actually, the model, like I said, it's a model that is looking for continuous improvement, right? So if we use the assessment, like I said, you don't have yes, you have a picture of what's happening, but it's not static. So it will evolve during the time. And by the fact that we recommend teams to do a pulse survey every X time, every 6 months, for instance, you get a vision on how the team is evolving and is adapting. And what are the principles they're struggling with more at a certain moment or at another time. So constantly evaluating, self-assessing with, of course, the objective, our goal is to make the teams autonomous. But the fact that they can go through the assessment several times in a year helps them also to see how they evolve and how they tackle the change. And we always come after the assessment, we work on a co-creation of a roadmap, things that the team can really implement after the assessment that will make a change in their ways of working, in the way they address the needs of the customers, in the way they collaborate all together. And this is really important in order to tackle the change and see how they evolve through the time.
Have you seen leaders being helped through this process? Because often what we see in marketing teams is that leaders and customers internally don't understand exactly what the marketing teams are doing and are influencing them by giving them more work. And it's only through in the Agile method, I think of, it's only through transparency and that realization what's happening in the instant in the tactical side that leaders can understand and appreciate what those marketing teams are doing. But I wonder, with those assessments over time, is it helping leaders to understand the chaotic nature of marketing, but also other teams, and therefore appreciate that they need to change and how they are managing their work?
Yes, and the thing is, the framework is not about finding the guilty, the one who is responsible of creating this chaos. So and this is also when you were referring to work with the system instead of with individuals. It's we're analyzing the system, and the leader is part of the system. So somehow what we achieved with the assessment is we help the leader to take awareness and to become more aware of how bad he might be at prioritizing and how bad the team might be at prioritizing. Why? Because most of the time they don't identify clearly who their customers are, or they don't understand what is value for these customers. And by understanding those concepts and being able to prioritize much more, we can work on a way of working that makes that the teams become more efficient, prioritize more, less overwhelmed, and providing value as such, and not just doing stuff because of doing stuff. And what I'm facing or seeing often are leaders that say, oh, I have a team that they say they're overwhelmed and they do thousands of things and they don't understand that it needs to be done. But sometimes the leaders don't understand either what the team is doing, and that most of the things that they're doing is not of value. And it's also then internally, there are some issues because you need to report to the global teams or so on, and that you're creating additional work to the teams, and you're not helping them to prioritize. So definitely, I think that's what I think also the power of the framework. We're talking about the system. We're not pointing at anybody. We're just helping the leaders to understand, to become more aware, and the team to become more aware. And to create that conversation so that they can reach agreement and a consensus on new strategies and new ways of working for the future.
Well, great. Christophe, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. It sounds like you're really helping companies and global teams out there with the Spiral Up process.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to discuss with you. And there's so much to say, so much more to discuss.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile marketing with John Cass. My thanks to Christophe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.